Hello, Bernard. Good morning.
Hi.
This is Sandeep from Samsung.
Hi, Sandeep.
Yeah, I saw your comment on the WG4 user story. I'm trying to incorporate them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what I already did is I created another document in this in our repositories folder. So what is the title of this document called? User Story 1, Impact Analysis. And I've taken the template from Bala and filled out the content.
Okay. You can share me if you, I mean, have you posted the link somewhere?
Yeah, either you go into the directory, but I just sort of put that into the chat here.
Okay. All right. We'll focus on this meeting.
Hmm?
Yeah. Hi, Bernard. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Come again, sorry.
Yeah, Subhash here, Bernard. Am I audible?
Hi, Subhash. Yes.
Okay. Just give me a second, Miss. I'm just updating my Zoom and I'll be able to join to share my screen. Yeah, hi, Bernard. Could you please confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, sure. So let me share my screen. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Okay. So let's start. I hope everyone has joined. Sure. Okay, so just a second, some pop-up has come up. Not able to unhide it. I'll stop sharing and once again I'll share it. Some pop-up has come up. Okay, okay. Now I'm able to stop the pop-up. Okay. So today I have planned some agenda for today's meeting. So, first one is our comments on our user stories. So that we are writing. So that is the impact analysis. So there are some comments. So let's check what we think around it. And then we'll give some 50 minutes to Sandeep to give the overview on the closed loop automation framework. So he had some ideas, and he will just demonstrate it. And then we'll go on the some discussion on the impact analysis, that user stories that we need to provide to SIG1 by the end of this month. So that let's discuss on it. And I have also prepared some slide so that will capture some of the details. and also it has some of the questions. So those answer I feel that will help us to clearly draw the picture of the service assurance and to fill the details. Okay. So yeah, and yeah, I just request if you are joining this meeting, please add your name here just to capture it. Okay. So let's start with our first user stories. Yeah, if anyone have any thoughts or any agenda to discuss, yeah, please feel free to add it. So I'll go through the comments on.
If we just one comment, you said that we should add to this document. If you could just share the link in the chat, then we can directly
Okay, sure.
add it.
The agenda, right?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so if you want to add anything, the link is available here in our channel, Task Force Service Assurance. So please add it there. Okay. So I'll directly jump on our first topic. So there were few comments I saw in this slide. So I think that is worthwhile to go through it. So first one is from the Sana. So she added some comments on the user stories too. So that she was proposing on on the UPF for users, its availability. So as an application owner of an app, preferably on the UPF, I want to maintain a UPF current availability on percentage to stay below 80%, so that subscription QoS experience is maintained. So it's all related to our second user story that C has proposed it here. Yeah. So it is about this NF closed loop. So currently, Bernard, would you like to address this comment, or just we will just keep in mind, and when we work on this particular user stories, that time we will address.
Yeah, I didn't sort of work on it yet. I can try to sort of comment the user stories and try to bring them in an initial form. What I've understood is that we should try to follow this template which Bala was presenting.
Yep.
I started that with this first user story, and I can try to convert the comments from on this document into separate documents where we have these user stories in a separated form, and then we can then go through the content and see if there are any additional things to be changed.
Okay, sure, of course.
And since I'm not quite sure, is Vance in this call? Maybe he would want to do the same. No, he's not in the call. Because I can just take those user stories and try to sort of fill them into this template and enrich them a little bit. Yeah.
This one, this comment actually I find a little bit interesting. So that is from the Vince Sipley. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. So the idea is like the resource will be identified as a managed object. So the assurance should identify those objects and their relationship with the services. So that is our high level intent. So I think this is a good comment to take in our to our thoughts actually. This is a good terminology.
Yes.
I think.
I think that my impression is that this is related actually to this impact analysis because it has the same aspect. Yeah, we've got these correlation rules. He's calling it, what was that? The relationships. So it's basically we're talking about how the high-level intent is related to the managed object. The thing which is new is the management service endpoints from my perspective.
Right. Sure. So yeah, these three comments I saw on this particular slide. So while preparing our detailed filling the template, that time we'll address these comments. Sure.
Yeah. By the way, I cannot edit your link. I'm not quite sure if I'm the only one, but I was not able to edit the link.
Okay, let me try to share this thing once again. Actually, I have given the edit link.
Okay.
Yeah, let me try once again. Let me share it. Just give it a try.
Okay.
Okay. So
Now
yeah,
it's
this
working.
was,
Yes, thank you.
yeah. So this was the one small our first item in the agenda. So let's directly jump on the second agenda item. So any question before jumping on the second agenda item?
Subhash, Vardha here. Actually, what was the user story, comment on enough application availability should be less than 80%? What is that about?
Actually, Sana, she had proposed one more user stories in our slide. So she wanted to focus on the UPF as a NF and wanted to formulate the closed loop there. And she wanted to ensure always the availability is the load is less than 80%. So that QSC she wants to maintain as a this user story. But yeah, details we did not do on it. We are just targeting on our this first user story, and slowly I think we will try to go on this user story going further.
Right, right. Because UPF should be always available, right? 100%. So that's why I have it out. Yeah, no problem.
Maybe some load or based on the capabilities, we need to address this particular NF. So that we need to think actually. I feel.
Right. Yeah, because UPF should always be available, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
actually.
Right.
Yes,
So
I think it's more like load, something like CPU consumption or whatever. Might be
correct.
more, yeah.
Correct. I agree. CPU should not exceed 80%. Okay, yeah. Got it. Yeah. Proceed. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So Sandeep, are you around?
Yeah. Hi. Yes,
Okay.
but
So yeah, let's jump on your proposal on the closed loop automation framework.
yeah.
Let's try to finish in the next 15 to 20 minutes so that
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to be quick.
Would you like to share your screen?
Sorry?
I can stop sharing.
Yeah. I'll try to share my screen. Okay. So let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, I'm able to see it.
Okay. Hi everyone. So this is the use case which we initially tried to do it in our lab in Samsung, and we had after some couple of brainstorming, we tried to demo this, and we have some demo, but it's with some proprietary NF, so cannot show here the demo. I'll just go through the slide and we'll see how much it makes sense here. So what initially we had is, I just changed the slide name to 35GST custom resources. So basically what we try to implement is that we have some sort of a intent coming from the user. Let me try to have a pointer, right? So we try to have some intent from the user, and user provides some sort of information. For example, if these are the core NFs, right? So it says, for example, I want 200 subscriber per session and 300 transaction per second is what my requirement for the particular core NFs, right? And then those information will be given in the custom resources, and then it deploys those intent, right? So we'll have some sort of intent to NF translator component within a CLA framework, that is closed loop automation framework. What happens in our case, we had prepared some sort of a domain expert configuration where it has been pre-prepared that if I could show you the Excel sheet, we did it with some sort of Excel sheet. I mean, it's some sort of a CSV file. through that, what we try to input here is that a basic algorithm. The basic thing is that if user wants 200 subscriber per session, if he wants to maintain, how many and what are the network functions required for that to be deployed, and internally what will be the configuration, like for example, what will be the CPU, memory, and the disk and all those things required in order to achieve this kind of a requirement. And that is what that will be always available from the domain expert, and we have prepared that internally. We can say that's a demo preparation, and then we try to deploy that. And when this kind of information comes from the user, we read our domain expert configuration and we find out, yes, these many NFs are required, and then we deployed those NF with so and so configuration, whatever it is mentioned here. And then we were able to deploy that those NFs. So that was the kind of a day zero configuration we tried to implement, and that was quite okay for us to demonstrate. Furthermore, what we try to do is that once we also had envisioned some sort of other custom resources, like for example, monitor KPIs, a condition and action. What we try to envision or try to implement is that we will have, obviously, as per the observability, there'll be a metric service, right, which will try to get the information from NF, right? And all the KPIs I mentioned here, all those KPIs values will be as per the 3GPP 28.552, where all the KPIs of 4 NFs have been mentioned, right? So this is just for the completion and example. It need not be that standard, I believe. Okay. So that what we try to do is that once those KPIs are available, right, the metric service again reads those domain expert configuration and intent, and it will try to match if I mean those current status, those current KPI status, not that NF is up and down, all those things, but actually the KPIs, we thought that we can get those KPI, and we will have a way to get it. So if we get it right, we will try to match with the domain expert configuration and correlate that. Okay, initially in the day zero we were able to achieve that. We thought that we were able to achieve this 200 subscriber and those transactions, but now it is not as per the whatever the requirement was. So maybe there is some sort of a scale in, scale out, or some sort of action is required, right, to correct those scenarios in the deployment. For that, we thought we will read those condition and actions artifact. It can be a custom resource through which we know that what is the condition, right, which we are trying to monitor, and what is the actions needs to be taken when this condition is not correct, right? So those kind of information will be available, and this intent to NF translation will take those actions based on this custom resource values, and it will try to reconcile and try to match those, try to make sure that even in the day 2, day 3, NFs are as per the intent which is specified in this custom resource, right? We thought that those information can be provided via NFU UI as well, if not the API, right? So this is the short summary of what we had initially planned and thought we can have as a use case, right, and user story for us, which will complete the closed loop automation kind of a scenario for us. I think I mean that's it in this slide. I had a few more information about what kind of KPIs will be. These are just an example. For example, user plane function, internal latency, packet loss, and all those things. So for any NF, this kind of KPI monitoring information can be provided by the user if via UI saying that, okay, I'm looking for these kind of KPI only, right? When it is deployed, just look for these information, don't look for anything else. And if these the values of those KPIs are not per this condition, take an action. So simple. Yeah, so this is something we try to do that, and I thought it can be good use case if taken.
Bernard, you have raised your hand.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Sandeep, for this proposal here. I would like to clarify a couple of aspects regarding this diagram. to sort of streamline sort of expectations and scoping. I'll try to explain a little bit also why. You have to imagine that sort of this input, which is coming from the northbound interface, is basically governed probably by the telco operators, where they have expressed their expectations, KPIs, and possibly also agree on what kind of actions should be taken or not taken.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would like to sort of understand if this is basically described in custom resources. Yeah, that's what would be question number one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that means sort of let's start on the left side. There's a high level intent, and it not only says sort of, I want to, for instance, roll out a 5G core. It might also include sections or information which might be related to the intent of what kind of amount of sessions, etc., should be captured here.
Yes.
And here, as one point, I would like to, and this has to do with the modeling guidelines, you can put this information everywhere. Yeah, that means if you're sort of trying to describe the spec of a custom resource, finding this relevant information, which is somehow governing the scaling or the SLAs, etc., sort of can be sort of handled in a very sort of heterogeneous fashion. And ideally try to keep in mind how we as an operator would be easily able to specify that in a well-defined section, so that we don't have to search sort of everything sort of where in the specs of where to put this information. That would be number one. Yeah.
Okay.
So in this top level part, try to understand sort of where would we ideally put this information. The second part, which brings me a little bit to this right side, you also mentioned that this could also be custom resources regarding the KPIs, conditions, and actions.
Yes.
So to a certain degree, on the left side, you've also already listed KPIs. Yeah. You just mentioned that this basically you're also saying KPI sort of it should be capable of handling sort of at least 200 sessions. And so there's a correlation between those two. And I would like to understand a little bit sort of do we have to have two different custom resources? Would we combine them? This type of understanding, I would like to sort of establish that we've got a clear understanding of where do I put which information, how do they have to correlate with one another, because you could also, let's say, misconfigure those two elements, and then you are sort of capturing the wrong aspect. So that would be one part of considerations here.
Yes. I think if I can answer that, yes, you correct those. There is a correlation between that, because the intent and the KPI monitoring name logically has to be same. You know, whatever you're trying to intend, you should try to monitor that. Yeah. So I agree with that. We should take that care.
Maybe come up with some guidelines, recommendations of how because all those things sort of will later on maybe also be part of the guidelines, which we would then recommend on how to structure that information. Now, the second part, which I would like to now mention, sort of going down to the intent to network function translator. My impression was basically that this is something like an operator, which is understanding this custom resource, which is coming up from up there. Somehow, what do I do with it, etc. So I'm fine with that. So basically, you've got a custom resource definition on the top, describing what the structure of that is, and I've got a corresponding operator for that. And this operator internally makes use of this domain expert configuration to do the decomposition into network functions, etc. That's fine, because this is special knowledge to be considered here. That's fine. What I'm not quite sure about is the interaction point between the net metric service, because this decomposition, which you're showing here, is sort of serving as input for the metric service, as well as that was this reads interface between metric service and domain expert configuration and intent to network function translator. This is something which is, for me, smelling a little bit like proprietary interface. And we need to understand how we can put that in a more structured, open way. So sort of it could be that we are, for instance, saying, if we are looking at the status field of the custom resource, which you are providing on the via number one, that means in the spec, you're providing the specifications of what is expected here. But in the status field, you could, when you're sort of updating the status of the custom resource, you could put this configuration information into the status field and read, have the KPI metric service read that information, and then it would be again a structured way of how we could get that information without having to revert back to a proprietary interface, which might not be specified completely here.
Yeah,
That
I
was,
think that's a good suggestion. Yeah. I think that's a good suggestion.
And then, so if we could streamline a little bit the diagram accordingly, that would be nice, so that we have a good understanding. And again, this is also a modeling guideline in the sense of if there's a decomposition from a high-level intent to a lower-level intent, and this could be that way cascaded, then sort of in the status field, we have the lower, let's say, the references to the lower-level resources in the status field of the custom resource of the high-level intent, something like that.
Yeah, this could also, when we model that, this can also do some sort of a state propagation as well. Each and every resources can have a status, and it can be derived by the status, which is, I mean, the model or the object which is below it, right? For example, I mean, in the real data center world, right? If your VM is not good, your data center is also not good in some way, right?
I agree.
Right. So yeah, I think that's a good idea, and we can I'll do that. I'll correct it, whatever the suggestion which you have given. I have noted down, right? And I'll try to elaborate that in one more slide specifically. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Sandeep. Subhash here. So I have actually two questions here in this particular slide.
Yeah.
So currently, I feel that we are trying to run the CLA framework in the management cluster, right?
Yeah, I mean, wherever those informations are available, right? Though wherever the operators are running, right? And the matrix services, wherever the matrix services are running, and it can have information about it, can connect to the NF. Yes, you can say so.
Yes, so there I see one challenge, because we are going to observe all the NFs, right? And you are sending all the information back to the metric service, which is running in a management cluster, right? So that part I see a little challenging, because we are going to create one distributed system, right? So there will be one management cluster and thousands of workload cluster, and if we bombard this metric from the our workload cluster to management cluster, I think that may create some issue, right?
Yeah, but that's part of the observability thing, which is already be taken care by that, right? So you can assume this NF KPI metrics can be replaced by observability object. I mean, the module in the NFU.
Okay.
So how it is handled, it will be taken care.
Yeah. And the second part of the problem, what I wanted to ask, how you correlate the deployment ID? Let's say you are deploying some NF, right? So how you are correlating with the collected KPI parameters? Because the deployment going to happen here at the workload cluster, and while you're doing the correlation, the CLA framework in the management cluster, how you exactly do it?
I mean, that's again, we discussed this in the observability, that we can tag those NFs, and those NF name can be, I mean, Vim one day suggested something related to that we can, those NFs can be identified by various tags on the resources, on the NF resources, right? It can be identified with the various names, ID and all those things. And when we run the KPI, or when we try to fetch the information of the NF via API call and all those things, I mean, will be available, I mean, via some tags. So yeah, I think that's, I don't think so that will be a problem, because there are many ways. I mean, even Vim suggested that, so I think that will be taken care. I don't think that will be a big problem.
Yeah. To be honest, if I may just jump in, sorry for that, but sure. I know that there are many ways, but ideally we should make a recommendation. And the reason being that if there are many ways, then the configuration options are going to be very heterogeneous, and the effort will be also big. So if we could come up with a certain notion of where we ideally would want to put that, then it simplifies the implementation efforts.
Right.
Yeah.
I noted down that. I will see that.
Actually, I think this recommendation should come from work group 5, I think, Bernard, because we might need this to prepare our service assurance framework, right? Service, correct? So
Yeah, no, well, no, there are certain things which are being generated, certain information where sort of, for instance, sort of the configuration process is the source of the information and not the observability guys. Yeah, that means if we are the source of the information here, then we should try to specify that, and then they can make use of it. Yeah, but again, it's sort of, we can also agree and optimize, but I don't want to have this. We've got 10,000 options and every vendor and every infrastructure decides to do it in its own manner. Then we haven't gained much, because the implementation efforts will always be high and have to be manufactured case by case.
Yeah, I agree to you. We'll do that. We'll try to specify specific things, the recommendation from the NFO or the closed loop automation side or the service assurance side, what we want and what ideally should happen, right? And then it's up to them, right? Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if there's no question, I will stop sharing, and thank you very much for providing this opportunity to explain this, and I hope we can take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep, for this wonderful presentation. And yeah, of course, this seems like we can use to materialize this same idea and try to go further.
Right. Thank you.
Great. I also want to know, Bernard, like, what is your, view on the high level intent, that has been given. In fact, Sandeep also has one slide, right? You're showing some other intents, right, Sandeep, like for SMF, I saw in one slide. So yeah, what's your view on that? Can there be, that's what even Subhash was telling, now that is scope of W5, we have to, it is okay.
I try to explain a little bit sort of my understanding, and please sort of jump in if you believe sort of there is something not correct. But it's about the level of control you would want to sort of exercise as a telco operator. And as a telco operator, sort of, we used to originally buy black boxes and say we switch on the boxes, and if it's working, that's great, and if it's not working, then we go to the vendor and ask them to fix it. Now, if we are looking at the specifications 3GPP of the network functions, sort of they are sort of defining all those network functions and also all the microservices underneath, etc., which are used for that, sort of are all part of this game. And we could, in the worst case, try to sort of manage those elements on the lowest level and say we are now going to specify which kind of pods and services should be deployed. But this is making the lives of the telco operators difficult. And so therefore, sort of having the possibility to get an offer from the vendor which says, I sort of know of the difficulties of that setup, so I provide you with a custom resource which is simplifying your lives. You don't have to say sort of, please set up the 5G core with this amount of AMFs, SMFs, UPFs, etc., and wire them in this manner together, but rather you've got a sort of a higher level custom resource which represents that entity, and where you could, for instance, also talk about session sizes, etc. That is fine from my perspective, but it is a high-level intent. What is monitored underneath is under basically the same pods, microservice, etc. And so therefore, if someone is coming up with a high-level intent, we need to be able to map it to the lower-level entities. And this is the user story 1, where we're talking about this impact analysis, getting this correlation information. And for that purpose, a high-level intent can be sort of provided by the network function vendor in any manner. That means it could be this NF topology approach, which we've seen in sort of possibly in release 2 as a starting point, but it could be something more complex coming from a vendor which has sort of made a lot of more thoughts about how these things should work together, and basically has created a facade on top of all those different sub-elements which might be needed, in the same manner as Sandeep has been showing also in this slide. So I don't want to specify a high-level intent has to be this type of custom resource. I would imagine that the vendors will come along with different types of high-level intent. But when they're specifying this high-level intent, there should always be a mechanism which allows us to identify the correlation information and sort of plug in all those policies regarding sort of compensating actions, etc., into this custom resource model. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it. Yeah. So what I got is you are telling it's fine. It depends on the vendor. If some vendor wanted to start with the NF topology, it's possible. If some vendors needs to start with a more abstract thing like transactions or subscribers, that's also it's okay. But the more important part is how we will translate the higher level intent into the lower structures. Am I right? I understand.
Yes, that would be the sort of the requirement that we say, yes, a high level intent is great, but we need to get this bridge between those two worlds, the high level intent specification to the sort of the things which we are monitoring on the low level elements such as pods, services, network interfaces, etc.
Right, perfect. But one thing very clear, Bernard, in the current Nefio architecture, NF topology, instances are there. Observability framework is being discussed, but the kind of NF operators, which require this correlation or which require this translation is currently not there, isn't it?
I agree. Yeah, this is due to the circumstance that the NF topology implicitly already specifies the relationship, and this sort of how should I say, sort of hides what we actually want to achieve, because I want to have a structured way, which is not only related to NF topology, but a structured way which would be applicable for any kind of high-level intent, which describes how do I determine which sort of resources are actually being sort of generated or used in the context of this high-level intent. So the NF topology cannot be the blueprint for everything. It's an example, and it should try to adhere to the principles which I'm trying to also sort of specify in the first user story. And of course, there will be additional user stories, which would allow us to determine this information in a systematic way without having to be afraid that this high-level intent sort of might be sort of on a totally different layer that compared to what the NF topology is currently doing.
Excellent. Yeah, we are in sync, Bernard. But one important stuff I want to add here, Bernard, in 3GPP, right? There is something called network subnet slice function, NSSF.
Yeah.
In 3GPP, actually, it is monitoring, few KPIs and deciding how much of AMF plus SMF plus UPF combination needs to be there. A kind of, what we are trying to do, you call it correlation. Van Shipley was calling it as splitting of managed services into managed objects. Here in Sandeep, he is calling us an intent to NF, mapper. Yep. So I think, in a way, NSSF, right, this network subnet slice function does this, kind of a high level, intent to
I just want to be sort of make sure sort of this approach here is a general approach. It doesn't sort of, we could also apply it to any kind of database setup, sort of, which is not related possibly to ORAN or 5G core, etc. So I want to have a generic approach, which is not sort of NSSAI would be sort of would be one type of application of that concept, but this notion of sort of cascading a high level sort of intent into lower level resources and services, etc., is something which is a generic approach which could be applied in a generic manner. Yeah, and so therefore, I don't want to limit the scope only to slicing. We have many other scenarios where we have a similar situation to bring together those constructs, and therefore I would like to be a little bit more flexible here.
Great. Yeah, I agree. The NSSF will become one case of the intent to NF conversion operator. Yeah, correlation. Yeah, interesting, Bernard. But one last thing. See, do you think, here, whatever Sandeep has presented, there is a domain configuration, manual job, which correlates the high level intent into the topology. In some cases, it can be a simple, for example, this NSSF case, it's a program. The operator, is going to be a program. Do you foresee any further complication, in determining from high level intent to the lower level, resource constructs and its relation?
There will be a lots. So from my perspective, sort of what was depicted in Sandeep's slides regarding this NF, sort of what was a transformer, or I forget the translator, and this domain expert knowledge. These two blocks, from my perspective, were the knowledge of the vendor of how to decompose or sort of structure or break down a high-level intent into substructures. And this is a lot of sort of having a lot of architectural knowledge, configuration knowledge, etc. in place. So I do believe this is important and valuable, and sort of a differentiating factor actually for network function providers. But it needs to be easily manageable, because if these things are monsters and there are 10,000 parameters of how we can do the translation, and then the machinery sort of works, but sort of it's sort of, if the configuration is as complicated as doing it on your own, then it doesn't bring much value. So therefore, what I believe is these two functions belong together, and they probably will have to account for sort of all the relationships between the different elements, also sort of IPAM lookups and all that stuff, which is going to be probably a little bit more complicated than a simple lookup of if someone says this high level intent A relates to sub resource XYZ. It's going to be more complicated in real life from my perspective, but it's a valuable function which is needed and which should be addressable sort of in a well-defined, structured manner. That's why, that was, by the way, also the remark regarding the custom resources and getting the status information, maybe as a reference point for all the decomposition.
Great. Thank you, Bernard. Yep, we are on the same page. Yep.
Actually, Bernard, I have a little different view on using the NF topology. I feel that can be generalized and can be used to create some generic NF instances. So I have captured that. That is my slide. So that I covered it.
Okay. So my impression was that in the NF topology, the decomposition is already specified in the custom resource model. Basically, it says sort of this high-level intent says, please deploy these network functions on those clusters. A very crude simplification, but that was sort of the gist of what I got here. Now, what can happen is that someone says, please deploy a 5G core onto cluster X as a more abstract sort of notion. And then sort of what a 5G core actually relates to. That means, is it going to be the AMF, SMF, UPF combination, or is the UPF going to be hosted on somewhere else? This type of sort of information would be derived during the configuration process. That means the high-level intent would not specify anything about AMF, SMF, etc. It would just say it has to be a sort of a high-performance 5G core, for instance. And then sort of the decomposition will happen within the sort of algorithms of the operator, and it will then enrich this information and ideally put that information into the status field of the custom resource, so that follow-up processes can look into that and say, okay, I've understood sort of the custom resource for the high-level intent has now been sort of has been broken down into sort of sub-resources, which are then sort of processed further on. And therefore, an NF topology, from my perspective, is a starting point, but it's a generic approach. There could be sort of other sort of more indirect approaches how this decomposition could happen.
Sure. We'll discuss on this slide. So before that, could we go on the third item, Bernard, on user story impact analysis?
Yes, if it's okay, I'll just share my screen.
Sure, Bernard. I'll start.
Just let me see if I can share it. Okay. So just as a reminder, if you're in a Slack channel, here up above is the documents folder. Yeah, that means here sort of we are capturing all the sort of the documents of sort of this task force here. We've got the design considerations, and we started with the user story in design considerations. You might remember there was this user story 1 here, impact analysis. And what sort of this impact analysis user story, what I did is I took the template which Bala has been provided in our network architecture SIG group, and I translated or enriched this information and put that also into this folder here. So here it's got a new document. It's called user story 1 impact analysis. Yeah, and this user story 1 here is basically following the template of Bala. I've got a problem statement. The problem statement says, when a DevOps team specifies a high-level intent in a model, for example, NF topology, but in future there might be others, and commits this information into a repository, it triggers Nephew to refine and hydrate this configuration information so that in the end, low-level resources and services, for instance, ports, network attachments, etc., can be deployed to the work clusters and can later be monitored. The DevOps team may therefore not know which low-level resources and services are associated with the high-level intent they have specified. In the case of incidents and problems, it is important to understand the relationship between these entities. That's the problem statement. That means if I've specified, please deploy a 5G core onto cluster X, and then sort of one pod is sort of saying, I'm now in a crash loop, etc., then the question is, does that affect any kind of high-level intent I've specified as a telco operator? And if I don't have this correlation information, I cannot really tell my customers there's an impact or not. So therefore, we want to have this correlation information, just as Sandeep has been showing that also in this metrics approach here. And therefore, as a required feature, the Nephew configuration process should generate information which allows to determine the relationships between the high-level intent and and the sub-entities. I'm just calling it in general sub-entities. It could be other custom resources or standard core resources of Kubernetes. The required features relate to functionality specified in the design considerations document. And here I just want to mention, here we are talking about in the design configuration document, we had here as a network, as a function of here this block, a function which describes which resources and services are subject to the service assurance mechanisms and how these relate to one another. And this how these relate to one another is exactly what I'm wanting to specify in the user story here. And the APIs which we would like to have is get related sub-entities. An API request which will retrieve a list of all the sub-entities which are directly related to a high-level intent identified by a type and an identifier. That means, for instance, if we are saying a simple read the status field of a high-level intent, and in a structured way, there's a list of the sub-entities where we exactly know if maybe there could be a field called sub-entities, and then we've got a list of those sub-entities, then that would fulfill this requirement. And there's another call here which is said, get all related sub-entities. So just imagine that we've got a cascading approach. We might have a high-level intent, which will be broken down to a medium-level intent, and then broken down to core resources of Kubernetes. Then we basically have a tree of dependencies which we need to look at. And here, this API request would retrieve a tree, starting with the top-level, high-level intent, and then breaking it down recursively to the lower-level intents. The next two elements are related to filtering. That means the same two API calls, but if we want to filter it to a specific set of infrastructure clusters, where we would say, please, I want to have this elements which are impacted by cluster A and Z and B, then we would get the same list, but there would be a filtering process which would then only show those sub-entities which are related to those clusters. Those are the feature requests which we would have. And these API requests will allow the DevOps team to retrieve information which is needed to correlate sub-entity related monitoring information with the impacted high-level intent. Stakeholders currently, I see the telco DevOps teams who would need that. Design considerations here is high-level intent is expressed as a custom resource. You remember, Sandeep, where we were talking about that when you were having your presentation. There might be different types of high-level intent. Yeah, it's not that only network function topology. There might be different ones.
Yes.
The relationships between the high-level intent and the sub-entities might be defined in the high-level intent itself, such as in the network function topology, or might be derived in the course of the nephew configuration process. There are these two options. Either they're all predefined or sort of have to be generated sort of in the course of the configuration process. There might be an end-to-end relationship between high-level intent and the sub-entities. That means a sub-entity might be supporting different high-level intents. So therefore, I'm saying this is an end-to-end relationship, which we need to consider. The approach should not be specific to the type of high-level intent or the related sub-entity. That means this approach should be generic. We should not have to say, if it's high-level intent of type X, then we have to do it differently from sort of a high-level intent of type Y. And the same applies for the sub-entities. We should have a generic approach here. It might be necessary to retrieve, this one I don't quite get. I'll remove that one. I believe I have to.
But could I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah. So, do you think we directly combine and make a generic intent, and that can accommodate different types of sub intents? I mean to say, like if you see any alerts or any fault, right? So they have a certain categories. So based on the each category, we interpret it as a different fault or different type of alert. So similarly, could we bring that analogy here and think around that? Is we have one custom resource, which CRD, which defines this all the high level intent. Because what happens now in a Kubernetes, we again have a some numbers are limited for the CRDs. And again, if we are going to define different high level intents per CRD, then I think we might consume that numbers also. So that also we need to think around.
You're right, but I do believe that in sort of the namespaces which we're then actually using, the numbers of real CRDs might be limited. So I'm first of all not too worried about the numbers of the CRDs. I'm worried about the structure of the CRDs.
Okay.
That means sort of if you look at the Kubernetes specs, there are certain sort of conventions of where to put which kind of information. There's metadata information about types and identifiers. There's spec information, which basically captures all the target state. There's information related to the status. And sort of these conventions, I would like to extend a little bit in the context of Nephew and say sort of what's happening here currently is that the custom resources are very much focusing on the scope of the resource itself, but not on the relationships. And my thoughts here are, if we are doing this breakdown and trying to also capture additional elements, we need to have conventions of where to put that information. And if we're saying, for instance, we've deployed a high-level intent onto a workload cluster, then we should ideally be able to determine sort of what kind of sub-entities have been generated in this context. And if we could put that into sort of a specific field in the status of a resource, then that would be fine, because it would be a well-defined place where we would then position that type of this information and have it available in a generic manner, and not have to worry about if high-level intent A and high-level intent B might have to account for different structures. So just imagine that you would have to talk about the KPIs of ORAN custom resources and 5G core custom resources. Those will be different types of aspects to be covered here. But the place where we put those sub-entity information, for instance, would be always the same. That would be already a simplification for us in handling that type of information.
Okay, sure. Okay, got it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please go ahead, Bernard.
Okay. So then sort of prerequisites here sort of was requested here. Sort of the idea is that sort of we've already got the CI/CD pipeline and Nephew sort of up and running. The required packages and custom resource definitions and controller have already been deployed to the management cluster. Our high-level intent has been sort of committed to a version-controlled repository, as mentioned before in the problem statement, and has triggered the nephew configuration process, leading to a successful deployment. This is sort of the prerequisite, and then these APIs here should be sort of available. And then based on that, requirements would refer to the features which I've sort of written here. There's currently no non-functional requirements. I forgot to mention that. No non-functional requirements. And acceptance criteria for the definition of done. We should have an open API specification for all requests, those feature requests which I've had above, a description of the algorithms, implementation of the needed functions, and it should be demonstrated based on API calls, for instance, on the release 1.3.5 But Sandeep, I thought your sort of diagram was already looking very good. I'm happy to adjust that here. Sort of if you can demonstrate that with your solution, I'm fine with that. Priority medium, sort of what's not in scope, monitoring of resource, event correlation, triggering of policies. And I just put as a reference the design configuration and the folder of our task force here. That's the user story.
Okay.
My question here is, for instance, for you, Sandeep, because you're already thinking of the implementation, is that something which you could work with, where you would say, okay, looking at, for instance, these feature requests, this would be something which you would try to address in the context of your demo, for instance?
Yes. Yes.
Great.
We can
So
do
then
that.
we've got
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
So then we-
initially I plan to do that, and we had some 50% work done for the day 0 configuration, and we can implement that going further. Yeah,
Mhm.
sure.
Okay.
But you know, this get related sub entities, get all related sub entities, all these things. Currently, we are getting it from a domain configuration. Am I right, Sandeep?
Yeah, I mean, those information, there are many ways to get it. I mean, a few information it's already getting, it will be available in the domain expert thing. And sorry, I'm sorry.
If I may comment on that a little bit, this was a part of our discussion which we had when Sandeep was presenting. I was saying this interface between the network function metrics and the domain expertise sort of box is currently still proprietary. And I want to have a generic interface which would not sort of refer to a specific function, but rather which can be applied to any kind of controller which is decomposing a high-level intent into sub-resources.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, man, it came here. So yeah, I think that's
Yes,
the
yes.
answer to your question. Yeah, fine. Yeah, to answer your question, Bernard, yes, we can implement that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so for me, that would mean, and I'd like to sort of also capture that a little bit. This is for me a handshake, basically. That means sort of saying, sort of from a requirements perspective, we've got a first view on what we would like to see, and we should try to sort of not change this user story too much, or only in agreement with you, Sandeep, for instance. And then basically you would also try to reflect that in the implementation, which you are trying to now drive with your demo.
Yes.
Very
yes.
good.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you very much. Then,
Yeah, Bernard, I have one question.
I will ask one last thing once you finish. Just,
Yeah. Shall I go ahead, Sandeep, or you would
yeah,
like
yeah,
to?
go ahead, then I'll just have final.
So Bernard, actually, my question is like, what is our high level service intent actually? Because what I understand, when we go to deploy any package, or I would say, currently the NF topology, if we are going to deploy, so it contains the package revisions, and based on those package revision, we need to maintain one relationship between the NF topology, NF instances, and again the resources. So that picture we need to bring it. But yeah, when we talk about service assurance high level intent, is it a separate intent other than NF deployment intent?
a very good question. So first of all, I must admit, sort of what Sandeep has been showing with his, for instance, his KPIs for the sessions, etc., is more than I had in the scope of this user story. Why? Because in the user story, you see nothing about sessions or KPIs, etc. It's more only about telling that as soon as there's a decomposition, we would like to know the structure of that. Not saying sort of how the KPIs would relate to that, etc. So this question, where do I put this service information or this KPI information, is something which in our design considerations was sort of listed as first point. Yeah, there's a function which describes the desired target states, qualities, and objectives and constraints for a resource or a set of resources. This sort of defining the desired target state and the qualities, we haven't yet specified where to put it, because we could have sort of an KPI agnostic topology description, and then with a separate resource sort of reference this topology information and add KPI sort of qualities along with that. That means we would have two different types of custom resources, one describing the topology, the other describing the, for instance, the SLAs to be sort of considered and constraints and policies, etc. Or we could embed this information into the high-level intent. We haven't decided that yet, from my perspective.
But sorry to sorry to interrupt you. Actually, I captured this information in my slide. That is our fourth item actually, and already we crossed the time. So, do you think we continue discussing it?
From my perspective, yes, that's fine. But I'm not quite sure. So I believe others might have to step out as well.
Yeah. So for the everyone, actually, we crossed the time, and we would like to continue discuss on this topic. So if you are interested, please be here. Otherwise, yeah, you can jump the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, Sandeep here. I'll just take this opportunity to, I mean, because I'm not talked to Bernard in any meeting. So, Bernard, sorry for the bringing the other thing, because I'm not getting you in some call. This is regarding the user experience workforce we have. I will try to connect to you for the user stories. For that, you already reviewed the document, but I'll try to connect with you for the user stories. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sorry for that. I'm currently pretty busy in many other projects, so that's why I'm difficult to reach.
Yeah, no problem. But I'll connect you. Thank you for the user story, user experience. You know, you have already reviewed that, but for the user story, I have to create it, right? So I'll connect with you. Thank you.
Okay.
Bernard, shall we continue?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, Sandeep, would you like to add anything here, or shall I proceed further?
Yeah, fine for me. That's it. Like maybe I can drop off, because you can continue if you want. And
Okay, sure.
I just wanted to connect with Bernard and just let him know that I will connect with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually the fourth item actually I had captured, so that I wanted to discuss. That might help to add the details on our user story actually. So let me share my screen. Is it visible, Bernard?
Yes.
Okay. So actually, the topic that you brought, there could be multiple intents to define assurance, right? So I was also thinking around it, like I wanted to define one generic one. So let's so that idea also I captured it here, and some questions are also I have added, so that will help us to think through it. Okay, so I'll start from here. Let me put in a slideshow mode. Okay, so first thing I put, like how we are going to express our information model, CRD or intent for service assurance. So most probably I feel that the work group 4 should be responsible to provide a end-to-end sketch of all the models. So service assurance should be also considered there. And there are currently, I see there are two possibilities. One is NF topology, which Steven is following, and also he's implementing the NF topology controller. And second one is the package revision. So in the further slides, you will see that NF topology get decomposed into NF instances, or you can visualize it is get decomposed into multiple site, and each site has a one kind of NF. And again, that NF is a instance of package revision. So it is a one package. So that defines that NF. Okay, so
can you show example for package revision? I must first understand the schema structure of this package revision to sort of.
Okay, okay, sure. Let me try that. Yeah, it could be here. Topology. Yeah, actually, yeah, capturing the examples are a good exercise to understand it.
The NF topology I understand, but package revision I
sure,
need to go. Yeah.
My internet is very slow. Okay, let me try that one example. Yeah, this is the package revision. Okay. So that contains information about some labels and the package name, revision name, which is the repository, and it's a life cycle. So it's just information that we get from the KPT command. So these are the information, and it is
yeah,
again,
but this is not a high level intent from my perspective, because it's already on the SMF level and basically sort of
correct.
trying to explain. Yeah, so okay.
So let's go to the NF topology. And if you see it here, NF topology contains the NF instances, and each NF instance has a name, and then it contains the NF template. So here they give the class name. So using that class, it will just fetches the one of the package reason, or it creates the package variant set, and using that again it will create a package reason. So that diagram actually I have it. That may help you to understand.
Yeah, but so basically, sort of so NF topology is the umbrella on top of the package revisions, is sort of what we are seeing here. But sort of now again, sort of when we're talking about the type of information which we're looking at, you've seen that in the NF topology there was some kind of metric information, etc., associated with capacity, I believe. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And sort of in this sense, the NF topology was capturing, sort of trying to combine in one custom resource both the decomposition rules as well as sort of the metrics to be considered here.
Matrix and speed.
If you look at capacities, for instance.
Yeah, capacity is there.
Yeah,
capacity is not a metric.
So, yeah, it could, and let me sort of, could I see sort of what kind of capacities they had here in mind? But were there only instance of numbers of
throughput,
yeah. So there are certain metrics which they have in mind, which could potentially serve as metrics to be sort of considered here. Yeah, that means you want to have sort of make sure that this throughput is sort of ensuring that amount of M bits or whatever to be available per UE or whatever. So this is already sort of some information which would relate to service assurance. Yeah, and therefore I just wanted to mention that if you look at that sort of template here, it's a template which is of course trying to be generic, but sort of if you look at the fields, it might not be a capacity field, it might be some kind of privacy field, yeah, which might be sort of to be reflected here, or whatever. And so therefore, I want to make sure that when we're talking about these metrics, we have a very good name and place where we put this information. And to be honest, sort of what we're seeing here in this network function template is an approach to hard code the relationships into the network function topology. That means here you do not dynamically create this information, you are statically putting it into this setup. And therefore, it's one variant of how you can do it, but it's not the only one.
Yeah, but just I'll make one comment here. So the NF template gets decomposed, and this capacity, right? It get generated as another resource called capacity. So that is also one resource in the NFO. So similarly, we can prepare this template in such a way that it will result in a generation of this following details. So that I captured is like what things could be needed, like some enrichment information, which going to affect the hydration process, what the action mechanism, trigger, policy, everything, of even observability parameters. So that we could capture in this particular, in the similar fashion, we can capture it and try to create those resources at the time of hydration process. Maybe we can, how we generate a capacity resource or how we generate a cluster resource, right?
Yeah.
Out of this template.
Yeah. My question here is, you're currently in the spec section of a custom resource. You're not in the status section.
Right.
The spec section is basically a section which says this is my desired target state. If I've got a high level intent, I normally would not want to go into the decomposition to the lower layers. I would want to hand that over to the operator to somehow make sense out of my high level intent. But I, of course, such as in the NF topology, could directly try to specify, I want to have AMF, SMF, and so on as an approach. This is hard coding the work breakdown structure of such an operator here.
Yes,
so that's fine, but my concern is simply, just imagine that you would have to now implement an algorithm which says, sort of, regardless of what kind of high-level intent, be it a dynamically sort of calculating decomposition operator or a static operator, such as here in the NF topology, I want to have this list of resources and the correlation between those and the high-level intent. Then I want to have ideally a mechanism which says this information which is shown here is not sort of somewhere which is undetermined in the structure of the custom resource, but where we have got this information at a well-defined point.
Sorry,
you get what okay, so let me try to explain again. You remember the user story 1, and I was saying I want to have an API which, regardless of what kind of high-level intent we have, it could be an NF topology, but could be something else. I want to understand, after the deployment has taken place, which kind of sub-resources are related to this high-level intent.
Right.
And now, sort of, if I look at the NF topology, it has got a very rigid sort of approach of how to do the decomposition, and currently it's in the spec. And it could be that this, in the spec, sort of the actual implementation didn't take place. Could be that sort of some of the elements are not up and running. And so therefore, I would expect this information to be, for instance, more in the status section and not in the spec section of sort of for this correlation information. The target values, of course, are in the spec section. Yeah.
Right. Right.
There's a comment, I believe, maybe in the chat. I just see.
So, you would like to place one more high-level intent also on top of it, right? If I understand correctly, to make it more dynamic.
No, I want to have conventions that if someone says I have a high-level intent, then I want to have a convention where to put my metrics. I want to have a convention where I can find the sort of the relationship to the sub-entities after the deployment has taken place. Yeah, I don't want to have sort of a sort of free-floating type of, you can specify it anywhere, sort of notion that we can, anyone defines a high-level intent, but if you want to then capture that information, you'll have to write custom code for every type of different sort of vendor solution coming in. I want to have sort of one way of where I can say, if I've got this path, then there I will find sort of this information. It's a little bit similar to SNMP to a certain degree. In SNMP, you've also got well-defined paths where you get a specific information. And I'd like to establish some kind of conventions where to put that information.
Okay. So the API and the API is our endpoint from where we can get those kind of information. But yeah, would you like to update this template also? Where exactly we need to define it? Do you want to provide some guidelines there?
Yeah, so let's do one exercise. Let's just imagine that we've deployed the free 5GC solution. Yeah. Okay. And let's look at sort of those entities which we would normally be monitoring. We would be monitoring the pods, the services, possibly the network interfaces, etc. Okay. Yeah, and then sort of see how would we get this information sort of out of the network function topology or any kind of other type of high-level resource. And what we shouldn't have is something which only works for network function topology, but not for anything else.
I got it. Actually, there is some similar analogy there in the own app also. So there we used to decompose service as a service or any NF, and NF goes to decomposed into NFC. So similarly, a similar analogy also we can bring it here. I think, Bernard, like currently we mentioned that we are going to deploy SMF, UPF, right? But let's say the example which you are giving, that I need a simple 5G core to be deployed, right? So that also should be captured in this template, and there should be one NF class for it. NF class for it for that particular 5GC core, and that should be again decomposed and should create a resource for the SMF, UPF, or AMF. So that way I'm visualizing. So that could be one way going ahead, I think.
Yeah, please make a proposal. I just wanted to make sure that there's a correct understanding. So again, we might have different types of high-level intent specifications. Right. And we might have different types of sub-entities to be considered. We should have one uniform way of how we can derive the relationship between those.
Sure. This exercise, yeah, sure. We will do it. This exercise. Let's see what we get. Understand. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So I'll go further in the same document. So yeah. Now the second point, what I wanted to put. Like some information I was thinking, like these are the very important for the defining service assurance, like source of the service assurance. We should which entities are the actor, and how the model will capture this source, and again enrichment information needed for the hydration process. So that already you mentioned in the last SIG meeting. And the further more items like action, trigger, and policy, that should be also have somewhere we need to capture it, right? Because once we get one trigger, like some NF is not working properly, we need to take some action like scale in, scale out, or even healing action. We need to take it. So, or some policy we need to trigger it. So somewhere we need to tell it what policy we need to take and which particular scenario we need to take it. So this should also come, should be captured in our CRD for the service assurance, right?
Agree. Yes. So maybe we could try to structure our user stories accordingly. Yeah. That means that we one by one try to say we have a well-defined source of where we specify the KPIs. We sort of then have a user story to sort of specify that. And I believe, by the way, Sandeep is already trying to cover that in a certain degree when we can refine that. Then we can talk about sort of where would we want to put actions and triggers. Might be that we, by the way, have also multi-level type of actions and triggers, because it could be that the network function is doing that, could be that the sort of controller or the operator on the worker node is doing that, and so on. There might be different levels to be considered here. But I would really try to say it's not one task of trying to structure that model. We will have to do that sort of user story by user story and then enrich it over the time. But I agree that these topics which you're listing need to be addressed.
Yeah, my thought is like we can keep continuously discussing on this topic and keep creating the user stories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The third point, what I see, service assurance could provide a stream of events to other consumers also, right? So they can other application can consume it, and they might take certain action, or they consume it and they do some activity, or they do some action. So that is also possible. So with that thought, I was thinking like, let's assume that in workload cluster, if we would like to take action then and there, so we can pass these events to NF operator, or simply in current scenario, the example is 5GC operator. We can pass some service assurance related events to the operator itself, and operator could consume those events and take action then and there. So either it could scale out, it can perform it there. Maybe it can deploy some new kind of pods. So this kind of activity we can do it. So that will help us to take action in the workload cluster. What do you think?
Okay, yeah. So I would want to ask simply, what is the Kubernetes way of sort of streaming these events to a network function operator? So if you could be a little bit more specific regarding the mechanisms, because normally we've got this reconciliation loop, and the operator basically is triggered by sort of changes to the target state of the reconciliation loop, and then sort of tries to. So I would just want to understand in a better way what would be the generic approach of streaming these events to an operator.
Okay, I'll give one example. Because Kubernetes only tracks if any changes happens on current state of any resources, like pod services or any trackable resources, right, which are defined in the Kubernetes. But assume that we need to perform. We take those raw data, process it, and make it more meaningful, then stream it and pass it to the operator, so that he can.
I'm fine. Yeah. So just don't get me wrong. I do see that there is a benefit in having this possibility. The only thing which I currently need to better understand is what is the Kubernetes way of having a service assurance solution sort of provide this information to the network function operator. Because currently my understanding always was, I've got a reconciler loop basically as a network function operator. That means the reconciler loop basically is triggered as soon, either sort of on a time-based event, or when a change to the database, that means to the ETC database, has been applied. And that means sort of if we are changing the custom resource which the reconciler loop is looking at, then we need to talk about where in the custom resource model would I push this type of event information, for instance. And I just want to better understand the mechanisms here, because if we are just defining an API which is not known to sort of this reconciliation mechanism, then we are introducing a new type of interaction pattern which Kubernetes might not have foreseen so far. And that's what I want to understand.
Okay. So I was thinking around this possibility that service assurance can also generate some informative data, right? So that could be consumed by other entities. So I was thinking the operator could be a good consumer, and because he already has the action mechanism or reconciliation loop, so that he can take advantage of
yeah, but But has he been subscribing to any kind of event source so far? That's my question. That means just imagine someone has been writing in an operator, and then we start saying, look here, apart from that, dear operator, just now we've got a different event source, try to handle that as well. This might be sort of an additional requirement which we might have to impose onto the operator so that they support that as well. Or we put that into the normal Kubernetes mechanisms, but then we would have to talk about where would we position that event information in that context. And I wanted to understand the mechanism here in a better manner to sort of see how that would work. Otherwise, I do agree that there might be benefit of doing that because there might be an enrichment and correlation information which sort of locally would not be known.
So, yeah, my thought was we are considering there are different loops at different layer, right? How those are coordinated and how we could take a local action. So with that thought, I was thinking on this line. Is service assurance is a generator for it is a generating some it is generating some information, so that can be consumed. So that thought I had, but yeah, we can give a thought here, of course. Continue, means I'm just raising some questions or thoughts. Sure. Okay. And yeah, I was thinking that means we can create some GitHub issue or discussion, and there we can track all our these pointers. We can take comments and do it. So that was one additional point I was thinking. Okay. Okay, I'll go further. So I was going to the Google Sheet code that I think somewhere close to the beginning of R1 they had delivered. So there I was just checking is how they were doing the this particular piece. Yeah, here is the complete picture. What was there in the code? Like whenever NF deploy custom resource getting created, so it had the NF deploy controller had two parts. One for the hydration, and another was tracking what got deployed. So this part is well covered in the current code, but yeah, this piece was missing where we collect the events and mark them whether the NF got deployed or not. So this was the process actually. It has some watcher agent, and it is a gRPC client, and there is a edge watcher which is the gRPC server, and it sends some gRPC messages here about the NF, and in the status portion of the NF topology, it gets marked whether it is deployed or not deployed. So and also it maintains the one topology. Okay. So if you see here the CR, the NF deploy had sites, and the site was representing one NF. And again, within the NF, we have the connectivity, which shows which are the neighbors, which NF are neighbor to each other. So, and this information, when you go to deploy this NF deploy CR, so that time this information get decomposed, and a topology gets created at the operator, and once we receive the event from the edge watcher, so that time it was getting marked it is deployed or it is not deployed. So that was the code. Okay. And in NF topology controller, which Steven is working on, and he had given previously one presentation, and also they are trying to I hopefully they will deliver in the R2. Now that NF deploy got converted to NF topology CR, and that is consumed by the NF topology controller, and that will generate the PVS. Okay. And that again controller consume it, and it generates the package version package variant, and that package variant gets deployed get committed to the GitHub repository, and finally it gets deployed at operator. Okay. And now the observability will come here in the management cluster. It will fetch those deployed NF, and it will update the deployment status in the topology controller. So that was the picture. So if you see the more details, there's an NF topology. It has the NF instance, and NF instance again it will have the same capacity NF attachment, and again details about the package, what package need to be deployed, or you can see it is the detail about the package variant set. So it is detailed about that. And finally it will go for the hydration process. It will prepare the topology, and it will get deployed. And once we receive this status from the NF operator or any observability mechanism, so that time it will update the status of our NF topology. So in this way they are maintaining the topology, and it's it's a deployment status in the status section of the CR. So that was the overall picture. So yeah, Bernard. So this was the overall picture that I collected. But yeah, I wanted to ask like whether we are approaching correctly or not. So
yeah. So what I don't quite know is if the approach of Sandeep and the approach of Stephen somehow would converge.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah. Because to be honest, these PVS, PV controllers, etc., could be helpful elements. But I was wondering if that's sort of hidden in the sort of high-level intent controller and not really visible to us. It's just an implementation option of how to decompose a solution and then sort of derive the sub-elements accordingly. So in this sense, it could be compatible, but I'm not quite sure sort of regarding the exact mechanisms. There I'm a little bit cautious because sometimes sort of I believe if we would ask Nokia, Ericsson, Marvini, etc., are you going to use the NF topology for your sort of specifications of your solutions? Then sort of I'm not quite sure if they're going to follow that approach. So that's why I just wanted to see that we are trying to describe an approach which can be widely adopted, but which works in a similar manner, regardless of what kind of a high-level intent approach we are trying to make use of.
Yeah, we need to actually work with the workgroup 4 and fix the recommendation, like where we need to capture those information.
Yes.
And
right.
Yeah.
Right. Subhash, in fact, we may need to have, Sandeep and we, Bernard, you from working group 5 perspective, Stephen from topology perspective, then Vim from infra, and so maybe the next meeting you can invite specifically as a mandatory quorum, and we'll discuss how the high level see Bernard's concern is we should have some high level intent which is not vendor specific, which is very generic. Okay. So, and he has one more concern, even I have that actually, is how the high level intent converts into this NF topology CR, because NF topology CR is not the beginning point. Even I am, of that same opinion.
Actually, Vanda, I just commenting it on it, with how exactly we can capture those information. The NF topology says that what NF I need to deploy, right? Or what another NF package I need to deploy. So so here in a package variant set or a package user itself, right? We can capture those information, right? And it might possible that as part of the service assurance, we create something for the hydration process, some configuration we prepare it, and when NF topology get decomposed into those NF instances, and NF instances get decomposed to package revision here, package revision, So that time this the configuration generated by generated from the service assurance affects those things, and it creates a new resource. So in this way, we are not affecting current implementation, and we will able to generate some new resources. So that is my feeling. It's like we can make it more generic actually in this way.
Correct. This needs to be in sync with this observability people, right? Vim, Sandeep, and all. And also, yeah, you're right. You're suggesting one way where we can bring the service assurance factor, into the enough topology CR variation as a hydration. So this part, right, we need to bridge clearly as a document, okay, or an architecture. This is what Bernard is also asking. So, and even please note that service assurance should be an intent, not enough topology. Some policy of service assurance should be an intent, right? Not enough topology.
Uh, why I'm stressing on the NF topology actually, Walter, because I would like to see as a consolidated one CR. It should not be like one in one place we are giving a CR for deployment, and one place we are providing one CR for assurance. It should not be a two-way communication. Sorry, I'm going to say 2 points for the communication. We should provide one package that carries everything, and so that we can maintain a state from it. Otherwise, there will be chances that we will not able to maintain the consistent state. So inconsistency, I think we should not go, because if we open a new path, right? So that may lead to inconsistency, I feel. But yeah, I'm open for your comments.
Perfect. That's what even Bernard wants. Even I want some sort of derivation from high level intent into low level resource plus package revisions. But from where we have to start? Do we need to start with enough topology CR and create this essay as a hydration, or we start with service assurance high level intent and derive enough topology CR? Those things I think we all have to sit. I especially want observability framework because they are the one who are bringing the CLA. Stephen should be there, Sandeep should be there, Bernard, you, me, and even other people should be there to exactly solve this consistency issue.
Can I ready comment? Bernard?
I agree.
I hope my comments made any sense, or we understood it correctly, Bernard.
So what I need to now sort of a little bit digest the approach, and I also sort of, let's say, gave you a little bit of homework regarding this sort of feedback to the network function operator aspect. I believe that we can map those two approaches, which I've seen from Sandeep and from you currently, reflecting what Stephen is currently doing. But I believe we need to sort of try to find out what is the common denominator of those approaches, and not tied specifically to network function topology. That means sort of, I believe that sort of we will not be probably able to sort of capture all the requirements in this network function topology entity. So therefore, we might want to understand sort of a little bit the generic approach of how we would capture that information in such a manner that it's easily accessible.
Right. Yeah. I actually wanted to ask the question to Stephen today. That means whether we can fit everything in the NF topology or not. So that could have given us a path, right? So that I was thinking. So let's try to invite Stephen and try to understand what he thinks for the
Right.
this approach.
Right. See, your way is something which is very interesting, Subhash. Finally, we want to have some sort of objective. Our goal is some high level intent, service assurance high level intent be converted into a low level, service, configuration attributes, NF deployment, package revisions, and all. Anyway is fine. Anyway is fine. But Steven, Sandeep, Bill, Bernard, you all have to be on the same page, because we are fitting observability framework people here, WG4, WG5. So all these people should be here, and finally converge.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So Bernard, could you help us to initiate this discussion in work group 4? Let them start with the service assurance and define the information model.
So in this UX approach, we want to have these modeling guidelines, and there I would definitely want to trigger this type of discussion and capture that. But I believe it's a sort of something which we need to bring together. And I must admit, I do not have the the time to coordinate the timelines of the different participants. Sorry. So I would definitely want to participate, but I will not be able to coordinate.
Okay, I'll try to check with Tal if he can help us, because Tal is active in both the work groups, right? So let's try to check with him. Yeah. Okay. So I'll try to go through this. I try to convert this as a proposal. Okay, and try to capture as much as the details on this particular topic, and also you have given me one homework to collect the information on what happens if we actually use the NF proposition to deploy it, and how we can capture those status, right? So that I'll try it. Yeah. So any other comments, Bernard, which we missed? I have this much content only.
No, thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, I have one point. Yes, excellent. You convert this as a proposal, and we can discuss. And one more important point, in that proposal, same proposal, we can try to include Bernard's point also. The high level intent. How it can be generic. It can be NF topology CR as you are visualizing, but can we have a kind of what sort of high level intent which is vendor agnostic, or so that anybody can use that part also we can try to put it in the proposal. It can be NF topology CR. Yeah.
But could I request you to give one example for your thought on the high level intent, one small CR or something, or some metadata, something?
I can try to start structuring a little bit first considerations here. Keep in mind that the high level intent is going to be entity specific. That means basically the only thing which we can try to structure is to say, at this point in the custom resource, you will find the high level intent interpretation will have to come from an entity which knows about the specifics of these managed resources, etc. And therefore, it's more like putting it in a well-defined place, but the substructures might be up to the vendors of what they would need for their purposes.
Actually, why I'm asking, because that will help us to understand, is it for the deployment or is it for the service assurance? It will give us actually one path to go ahead to talk on the examples. So that's why I'm asking it. Okay. Okay, Bernard. Yes, I have covered all the things that I have captured. And were there any comments before closing?
Yeah. For me, it is a very good discussion. I'm not sure, Bernard, Jitendra, it has become too long, but many things we have touched. And in fact, Subhash, even I have understood your part, in this slide, actually, finally. So yeah, it's a very useful discussion. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for
participating
and discussing late. Thank you. And have a good day.
Thank you.
Let's move.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.